Welcome to another edition of our happy hour tastings right here on Canadian Football Perspective. Thanks for checking out the YouTube channel. As always, make sure you are following us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at CF Perspective. And of course, at Sawdust City Beer, and is the brewmaster and the co-founder of Sawdust City Beer, Sam Corbeil, who's always nice enough to give us a couple of minutes here to talk about our favorite thing, beer. And today, Sam, we have an opportunity to sample something that I am intrigued by, because I think when a lot of people hear IPA, they go, yeah, I know what that is. And if you hear the word mojito, you go, yeah, I think I know what that is. If you smash them together, which is what you've done here with the Mojito IPA, Tropical Storm Mojito IPA, that's a hell of a combination. As I pour this thing, I want to know, what is the origin story, the thought process that goes into, let's create a Mojito IPA?
Well, this is a bit of a flavor storm. It's got everything that it says on there. It's the base of it is our sour IPA, which had a lot of cocktail-esque characteristics on its own. So we wanted to sort of elevate that, and we thought of some, what kind of cocktails do we all like, and what works well with IPAs, and we all really like mojitos or Moscow mules or that lime kick that we wanted, and we figured we could integrate these flavors together and make something that was a little bit, better than the sum of its parts. And we're really super happy with it. Like, you get the lime right off the start. Then when you taste it, you get the hops and the sour. And then at the end, this mint comes through, this cooling, refreshing mint. So along with the effervescence of the carbonation, you get this like super chill mint vibe. And it's going to be a great summer beer. The only thing that frightens me sometimes is the 6.9%, because it's really very easy to drink. And unfortunately, 6.9 can sometimes run right against that. It's kind of counterintuitive.
So I have so many follow-up questions on this, because I'm not just saying this because I love what you guys do at Sawdust City. I'm saying this because I'm genuinely interested in how this comes to be. And as you say, the combination of 6.9 ABV is interesting. The flavors that you mentioned are interesting, but I want to begin by asking about the layering, because when you talk about, well, it goes from the lime into this, and you get this little kick of mint at the end. One of my favorite things in craft beer is how you can almost, the flavor profile, it bounces around depending. And I love this with my fiance too, because she likes beer, but she's not a huge beer drinker. And sometimes I give her something, and her favorite part is if there's a beer that's chocolate, vanilla, blueberry, coffee, and she takes a sip of it and she goes, oh, ooh, oh yeah, there it is. And she kind of like, she rides the wave of that idea of, wow, how are they able to layer these things so you taste them at specific times? As a brewmaster, what is that process like?
Well, I think a lot of it's just toning down one and amping up another, so that one that's a little bit more prominent is always going to be at the forefront. So the lime, we don't add the lime till the beer's actually in the bright tank, which is where we carbonate it. We actually get the lime zest the day before, and what we do is we steep the lime. So it's 12 kilos of like super fresh lime zest, like it's intensely limey in the brew house that day. And then we push that in, and then we follow it up with like a sixth of the amount of mint, because mint can be, sometimes polarizing.
Yeah.
And we wanted mint to be sort of just, it's a walk-on character. It's not necessarily the main focus, which we wanted the lime and sort of that tartness to be the showstopper. And it really worked out. Like, a bit of it was, good old-fashioned luck. Sometimes you throw a Hail Mary and you catch it in the end zone, but a lot of times it's tough. So we've done these before, so we had a pretty good idea of what we were getting into, and we were able to hit it. And I'm super happy how it turned out, and it was a lot. It was, even to me, I found it puzzling how it just kind of comes in at the end, because that's what I wanted, and it just worked out.
I'm trying to imagine the moment where, after you go through the tasting and the sampling and trying to sort out exactly what flavors you want and what intensities, do you know when you hit the one? Like, do you take a sip and you go, okay, that's the one. That's the final version of this? Because I imagine there's so many different incarnations of this to try and find the correct balance when you're dealing with such interesting ingredients and flavors as well. Because as you say, mint is, I think it's super polarizing. Like, mint used in the wrong way can turn into a disaster in beer. But with this, as you say, this is my first time having a couple of sips, and it's this kind of gentle little kiss at the end of the beer that reminds you, oh yeah, I'm still here, but it doesn't overwhelm you, which is, I would have to imagine that's difficult to do.
Yeah, we didn't want lime toothpaste, which sometimes that's what happens with the mint, is you end up with this like super chill, almost like chewing on spearmint gum. And we didn't want that. We wanted it to be like, we start at the low end, and then if we need to add more, we can always add more. You can't take it away. So we start, and then we bump, if we needed to, we bump it up. And we've done in the past where we've had to do a couple extra bounces where we put it in. But with this one, we started low, and we're like, this is where it is. We feel like, let's play out this first one and see, because also over time, the beer will change. Like when you package it, within a day or two, everything starts to kind of come together a bit differently. You got to give it a bit of time in the can and then revisit it, which is the fun part.
Yep.
And then decide at that point, okay, next time we're just going to do a little bit more. But we were like, as we've been having this over the time, like I actually find the mint kind of grows a bit over time to like even a nicer, like it's right in there. So any more might have been hazardous and a little bit too chill.
The lime flavoring that you put in as well, I think a lot of people that might not really understand the process of getting these flavors in there, they think, they see a citrus IPA or a hazy something that has citrus notes or grapefruit or stone fruit or any of that, and they would say to themselves, well, they take orange juice and they pour it into the beer, or they take lemon and they squeeze it in. When you say that you get the zest, what's the difference for you as a brewmaster between using zest or using actual juice? And then, of course, the steeping process that you mentioned as well is an approach that I think a lot of people will kind of be amazed by the amount of work that goes into getting that singular flavor out, but getting that singular flavor in the right way.
So basically, if you use juice, you're dealing with a whole new sugar strain, and you have to then be ready to deal with the fermentation of that juice. And juice is far more expensive than zest. And with the zest, it's the same as cooking. If you want to hit something with a flavor, like right before you serve it, you zest a little bit of citrus on top of something that you're just about to cook, and that heat releases the oil from the zest, which then gives you this power punch of that citrus that you want. So basically, it's the same idea. We take that zest that's super oily and super fragrant, drop it into 85°C water and let it steep. It pulls out that flavor without us having to deal with 12 kilos of little lime zesty things floating around in our beer. So it's all about like process and capturing the flavor with in an economic way while still getting the desired effect. And we've been doing the zest thing now for a number of years and sort of getting better at it as we go. We've tried different ways of doing it and extracting it. We find this way to be, although it sounds very involved, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but it's still not that hard. And it's just us putting it together, letting it sit for a couple hours, and then just pushing it in. And then we have way more control, because with sugar, if you don't get it all fermented out and then somehow some yeast gets into a finished can, you can end up with like exploding cans, which is an issue that's sort of reared its ugly head a lot in the States with people adding juice right before packaging and then having their cans explode. And that's just not right.
Yeah, and that's interesting too.
I don't think anyone deserves.
You would think that is, the cheap way out to add the juice and just, shortcut and not go all through all the work. But like you're saying, the juice is expensive, so it's not as though it's you're saving yourself. It's a strange approach when you put it that way, where it's like, well, we can do it the right way, save ourselves from the headaches, and also be able to have it, packaged the correct way, and it costs us a little bit less as well. The other thing I wanted to ask you about this is the actual color of this, because it is super hazy. Like you say, it doesn't taste at all. It doesn't come off like a 6.9 beer, as you said, which is magical. I think a lot of people will appreciate that part of the work, but it's this beautiful, very light golden color that almost feels like it gets lighter as you go more and more towards the head. When you are going through this process, do you have a plan in place where you imagine what the color is going to end up being originally, or do you just go with the flow of what you're working on, and then it comes out and you say to yourself, okay, that matches what we're trying to create here in terms of the identity of this specific beer?
this one we wanted it to be like right now. The Hazy IPA is where it's at, and that's what the people want. So it was always going to be the base. Give them that juicy, hazy. It adds like with a lot of proteins in suspension, you get a little bit more creamy mouthfeel, which adds to the enjoyment of this. We did up the carb a bit, which gives you a little bit more effervescence and zippiness on the tongue than we would with a regular hazy IPA. So it's kind of putting a foot in both fields. But it does look wonderful, and I think it's all about the gram these days, and people want to snap that photo, and that's you gotta do it. You gotta play the game, and we're very cognizant of that. And maybe in 2 years it'll go back to clear, and we'll be making West Coast cocktail beers. I don't know. I like the idea that we can play around this much, and when you can ebb and flow with the styles and play your own game. And it's the great thing about craft beer is that there is that ability to do what you want and still be adventurous, and it's great.
In most industries, Sam, as you know, whether it's stock trading, broadcasting, otherwise, the best people at it are the ones that can see a little bit into the future, that understand when those trends are going to change, get ahead of it a little bit. How difficult is that in your line of work to understand where things are trending? Because as you say, hazy IPAs are in. It's almost like, well, if you hit the hazy stuff too early, it's not hot enough yet. And if you hit it too late, you're behind everybody else. You're playing catch up. And by the time that it shifts to something else, well, you're just pumping out the hazy IPAs. And all of a sudden, you kind of have to hit it right at that peak. But you'd like to know that you got to hit it so you can be there in time.
So it's tough. And like a little Sawdust story, our first beer we ever released was called Gold Beach Pale Ale. This was 10 years ago, November 18th of this year. And without any, idea of what was to come, that beer was supposed to be, and it says right on the first package that we ever did, it was like a hazy August afternoon, these juicy hop flavors. That was already on there 10 years before I ever even heard that vernacular or those terms used for beer. And it sort of like, it was, people liked it a lot, but it was ahead of its time. And by the time we were ready to go the other with it, sort of, we didn't really know what to do with it. And it was kind of, now it already passed. And like, it was a little bit ahead of the curve. And we did miss it. And then now we have Narnia, which was a straight ahead hazer. But like, yeah, if you miss it and it's too soon, it's kind of like, ooh, we like missed it by that much. But, one of the things we like to do is we always have a lot of things going on. We like playing with different styles. And we'll always have, an ear to the future, but an ear to the past. And we're always going to play either side. And a lot of the time, one of them will hit. And who's to guess? Like, I didn't understand milkshake IPAs, but they were there for a second and they went away. But trends are difficult. And it's, you'd be lying if you were saying you had some tuning fork that allowed you to read the stars and figure out what was going to come next.
Yeah, the fun of the journey, I think, is the moral lesson that we can all take away from that one. Well, we've got a lot to celebrate around the Canadian Football League this week. Canadian football fans everywhere. Again, time running out on the promo code. Listen to our podcast if you want to find out exclusive deals that we have with Sawdust City. Check it out. You can get it on our Twitter feed, Instagram. Otherwise, it's up on Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. But I am using today, Sam, one of my favorite beer mugs, which I don't know if people can really tell, but it's actually got the football laces
awesome.
That is into it. It's very difficult for me as an ex-quarterback to not just want to throw it because I fit my hand onto it just like it's the ball. But
you're doing it right now.
I'm ready to wind up and pull this thing back, but I'm not going to waste a single drop of this because it is a beautiful creation. And it is, again, the Tropical Storm Mojito IPA. Get it everywhere that you get beer. And, of course, get it on sawdustcitybeer.com as well. Sam, cheers. Thank you so much for this. It's great to catch up as always.